You are watching Life on Gabriola TV, community television, for you, by you.
Oh, welcome everybody. It's so amazing to see everybody here tonight. We are humbled and so very grateful at the number that are here, the interest that's been shown. I'm Ann Poshman. I'm president of the Arts Council, the Gabriola Arts Council, I should say. And this is the inaugural Breaking Bannock Building Bridges event. That is B to the fourth. B to the fourth for anybody who wants to know and wants to shorten it. I would like to acknowledge first the Government of Canada and in particular the Department of Canadian Heritage for their support of our Breaking Bannock program. This is a program which we hope will continue on for until March 2025, so stay tuned for that. And so now I would like to introduce you to Satasia White. Satasia joined the Arts Council team well, it seems like ages ago, but yeah, it was January. Yep. She's with us for a period of time as she shapes this wonderful Breaking Bannock program, and that's in fulfillment of the Samari grant that we have. She's been absolutely integral in pulling this event together tonight, and we're blessed to have her working with us. I hope by the end of this to be able to say fluently a few words like welcome and thank you. That's a big challenge for Satasia and me to work on, so welcome, Satasia.
Haitchkasiam. Asiam Nasietya, Isiam Nasalchwain, Eatsiam Nashqualaqua. Aikwanasilum Nala, Anthapat Satasia, Tracy White Tanaschwinitham Alt Nasquish. Tan Eat Sun At Snuneymuxw Kw'umut At Upachasit. Nashaweli At Snuneymuxw Na Main Hansawias Isolewia Nithpet Silech Kw'umut Kw'umut. Ellen White, Doug White Sr., Doug White Jr., and Joyce White are the English names of my parents and grandparents. So good evening, everyone. Aikwanatna Makwait. I am thrilled to be here and do some the welcome. I'd like to, our councillor, Bill Yoachim, has asked me this evening to do the welcome to the Snuneymuxw territory. So, Ichwam, Meet Nuilam Sap at Snuneymuxw Tamach. Chwam Nashquelawin Tana Snuneymuxw Tamach. So I welcome you this evening to the Snuneymuxw territory. The Snuneymuxw First Nation is unceded territory, and we are also a signatory to the Douglas Treaty of 1854. And so we welcome you to this territory this evening. I'm really thrilled to be here, and I just want to do a quick, one quick, let's see, how are we at here? I'm doing it, our schedule changed a little bit, so I wanted to make sure I'm just covering everybody. One quick little trigger warning, if any, reconciliation, all sorts of, these hard talks can bring up emotion in people, and if there is anything, if people need a timeout, we have lots of space, outside the doors if you need to grab me or Ardif. and, need to have a talk about anything, those things, can happen. And we want to make sure that, that people are looked after, that, that you're in a safe and comfortable place, and we welcome you to here. So, sounds good. Thank you. Haitsapka, Makwait. Now I'm going to introduce, I'll introduce Katherine this evening, and then Ardith is going to come up and introduce our guest, Councillor Bill Yoachim. But it's my distinct honor to introduce an authentic ally, Katherine Palmer Gordon, a lawyer, author, former chief negotiator, global negotiator from our Maori brothers and sisters in New Zealand to these lands of the Coast Salish and the Kw'umut peoples. Katherine has spent most of her life's work working in reconciliation in communities, documenting as well as championing the life stories of our heroes in her incredible books. Katherine is more that exhibits and epitomizes more than a label of what being an ally is. Katherine, you show up and you work in thoughtful and sustained ways to affect systemic change. And Katherine has made space and affirmed Indigenous voices, which most of society does not. And I want to say, raise my hands to you, Haitchkasiam, for creating those incredible spaces. And I think, I just want to say thank you. You really do live your life as an ally, and I appreciate you. So please, everyone, welcome Katherine.
Hello, everyone. I had hoped to introduce myself in El Camino tonight, but I'm scared, so I'm going to do that next time. In the meantime, let me introduce you to myself by using my grandmother's name, Kamchatsia. I'm Ardith Cooper. I'm from Sauk, Songhees, and Pachidat on my father's side. My late mother was Andrea Wesley from here in Snuneymuxw. For those who don't know me, I'm a resident of Gabriola now. For those who do know me, let me say thank you, friends, and thank you to everyone for being here tonight to help make Breaking Bannock a reality. Now, I checked with him beforehand. I don't know Bill Yoachim, but I'm introducing him. Normally, I would read his impressive credentials, but tonight I'm going to do it differently. And those who know me well will figure I'm going to tell a story, and that's what I'm going to do. Before Christmas, I went on a holiday with my two nieces, Tiamtino and Lydia. During that trip, my younger niece, Lydia, shared with me her hopes and the trials and tribulations of getting into her master's program at Emily Carr. But Lydia was over the moon with happiness when serendipity intervened in the person of Bill Yoachim, and she asked for help. Bill was able to cut the red tape lengthwise, and an overjoyed Lydia rechristened him. Emphatically, she said, "Bill Yoachim, National Treasure," and then again more loudly, "Bill Yoachim, National Treasure." I share this with you because you and I know or come to know Bill for his dedicated work at Quantum Lelum, his effectiveness as a Nanaimo City Councillor, or, as somebody taught me, his skilled negotiation skills. You know who you are. But like all of us, there's another facet. As my little purple-haired artistic niece would say, I give you Bill Yoachim, National Treasure. Thank you.
Hka, thank you for those amazing words of introduction. I've been lucky enough to know Bill for a long time and to call him a friend. And I think there's more that Bill might like to add to introduce himself before I start the conversation.
Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for the kind introduction. Wow, I'm overwhelmed. Lydia's doing amazing over there. So it's great to run into Lynn over there in the city. And thank you, Satastia, for opening us up this evening. Thank you for those that came on your busy schedule, considering there's a Canuck game on, so it's quite impressive. And Anne, I don't know where Anne's sitting, thank you for championing this in your role of being the president of the Gabriola Arts Council. Thank you for taking this bold initiative and groundbreaking, Breaking Bannock that is going to thrive and bring our peoples together, which is, we're slowly getting there, but it's long overdue. So it's champions like yourself and everyone in this room that's going to get us there. I am the executive director of a child welfare. We would like to call ourselves an agency called Kw'umut, Lelum. We serve 9 First Nations from Malahat down to, up from Qualicum down to Malahat, excluding Gallatin tribes. We service our folks on and off. I don't like the colonial term, the on and off reserve, but we got real, right? And then also we're at this present time, we've been blessed and privileged with 7 new Childhood Nations have come forward with the government of BC and said, when our people are residing in the Snuneymuxw Lelum territories, we want Kw'umut Lelum serving our people, not the MCFD. So it's not us versus MCFD, it's just us doing what's right. So this conversation, reclaiming what you hear about what's jurisdiction and whatnot, and child welfare and prevention work. So I don't want to minimize it, but it's doing what we should be doing as Kw'umut people. We always want to look after our guests. As Satastia knows, in our longhouse or in our ways, as if you're in our territory, what makes sure you're fed and looked after, etc. So that same concept we're doing with the Chalmers folks and also our own communities at a pretty grand scale. But also I'd like to recognize in the room some fellow Snuneymuxw members in the room in the back. There's Tara White, her son Cole. So it's nice to see some fellow Snuneymuxw in the room, and welcome. And I can leave it at that. And I'm fortunate at being involved in since 2002 on our council at Snuneymuxw, and then took a hiatus and was on city council for the infamous 2014 and 2018 term. It's a growing curve. There was lots of learning, and also really I was privileged to sit on the RDM as you, when you're well represented today, I'm sure. I'm just not up to snuff, but back then you had Howard. I'd like to say hi to my brother Howard Hooley, who was your rep back in the day when I was on the RDM. So leave it at that for now, because we've got lots of time to have a conversation. Thank you, Katherine. And known Katherine since 2002 when she was with the treaty, the province, the big bad province back in the, I'm kidding it all. Katherine was with the big bad province. We got in, and of course her journey. She's been an ally from day one for not just to name, but older people, just for a better society. And I'm really pleased that she's back in our neck of the woods, but also obviously do make a difference down there in New Zealand. Thank you, Katherine.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. And I will just mention, because he's too humble to say so himself, but Bill has worked so hard and so much for community, not just for his nation, but for community in general. He's a soccer fan and takes his kids to soccer every weekend, and is very involved in bringing soccer to youth and kids all over the province, not just here. And in 2022, he was awarded the BC Community Achievement Award, which is a very high honour in the province as well, and well deserved. So.
Thank you.
I was going to introduce myself a little bit more, but really that was a very hard act to follow. So thank you so much for those incredibly beautiful words. They mean a huge amount to me. But for anybody who I haven't met yet on Gabriola, I've been extremely lucky to live on the Snuneymuxw territory in Gabriola for more than 20 years now. Hard to believe, but true that much time has gone by. And amongst other things, I'm an author and have written a number of books, including a couple of books amplifying voices of Indigenous peoples in British Columbia. So very fortunate life that I'm living and fortunate to be here. And I want to say thank you very much for coming and this opportunity to be here and share knowledge and experience. And really that's very much what Bill and I want to do, is have a conversation together, and then afterwards allow the opportunity for you to ask questions. And in my experience, and I'll just tell you a little story, especially from when I've been working as a chief negotiator, people will get me into their vehicle or into a little room somewhere, and they'll ask the question that they're too shy of asking in front of a crowd. And really there is no question that you should be too shy. If you're wanting to learn, if you're wanting to listen and educate, please, when the time comes for questions, don't hesitate to ask. That's what we're here for. Another thank you, because Bill has said thank yous, certainly on my behalf as well as his, but thank you to the cooks, because if anybody missed out on that food, that soup and that. The most recent book I've written, that Satasia mentioned or alluded to, is called This Place Is Who We Are. Stories of Indigenous leadership, resilience and connection to homelands. And this book amplifies the voices of Indigenous peoples of the Great Bear Rainforest in particular, because again, another great fortune I've had and continue to have the luck and privilege of working with a number of nations in the Great Bear Rainforest. And in the book, they're talking about their connection to their homelands, their values, their laws, and their vision for future generations. And so when Ardith first approached me and said, would this be something that you would do? Would you come to Breaking Bannock and have a conversation and talk about how I approached writing a book like this, where I'm non-Indigenous, I'm writing about Indigenous peoples, I'm telling their stories as a real-life illustration of a number of important themes that we wanted to talk about tonight. So that includes respectful, authentic allyship. It includes how you strengthen relationships, how you elevate understanding, and how you amplify Indigenous voices well. And we also talked about how I approached the themes and the way I worked with the people in the book, and the principles that I've gleaned over more than 30 years of working with Indigenous peoples, whether it's writing with them or working in negotiations or working in agreements of communication, whatever it is. Those principles can be applied in any context. They can be applied here on Gabriola when we're talking about community planning or community visioning or getting together about the need for a better soccer field for the kids here. All of these principles apply in all of those contexts whenever we're working together. And I'm going to do that. But first I just wanted to say again, feast and grateful I am, Bill, that you graciously agreed to join the conversation tonight. And there's two reasons for that. First, there was in this book, which came out in 2013. It's called We Are Born with the Songs Inside Us. And in that book, I wrote about a number of just amazing young Indigenous men and women from around the province just doing great things with their lives. And Bill's chapter is called We Will Go Forward. And in We Will Go Forward, what Bill talked about was his story and his vision of a future in which the people are universally upheld, uplifted, and celebrated in their territory. And, almost no one here tonight, there are a few of you, but Bill is very, very well positioned to speak eloquently to that vision and that future. And I'm going to be asking him about that in a minute. But secondly, also because Bill can speak to connection to and knowledge of this land that we're sitting on, and what it means to Snuneymuxw, and what strong community relationships look like here from the nation's perspective. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do to kick off this conversation, with Bill's permission, which I've already got, and you'll be hearing me talk about permission in a little bit, but this is some of what Bill had to say in his chapter, and it really resonates with both of us about tonight's conversation. Bill has put a lot of thought into how to bridge the gap between Indigenous people and their fellow British Columbians. What will help remove the barriers that prevent Indigenous people from going forward? Many First Nations people are living their lives in extraordinary circumstances, dealing with forcible separation from their culture, discrimination because of the colour of their skin, and irrevocable loss of their land. Bill says, you take away rights, traditions, the land, and the means of self-sustainability, that represents our whole way of life. No wonder we have out-of-control suicide rates, poor health, bad housing. How do we move forward from that situation? I find if you just lay it all out on the table, most people start to understand, he continues. With understanding, you can start building a relationship. And I think that's the best way forward for First Nations now, building relationships with their neighbours, so our communities can live together as one, while still respecting each other's rights and differences. It's a much more positive way to go, and it's good for everyone. We all have to go forward, First Nations and non-Indigenous people alike, and it's a lot easier to do it arm in arm than pushing against each other. An emotional and spiritual benefit also comes from respect for and acknowledgement of his First Nations cultural identity and right to govern itself in its territory. With support from our neighbours, adds Bill, I believe the day will eventually come when we really can bridge the gap for Snuneymuxw people, and we can all go forward together, community to community, with a common vision that is in everyone's best interests. Bill, those words, that conversation that we had, the words were published in 2013. Our conversation was in 2012, more than 10 years ago. You know, it's 2024 today. Some of those barriers still exist. What would you have to say about the barriers that are holding back Indigenous peoples today? The acknowledgement of the history in Canada. How does that affect Snuneymuxw people in 2024?
Thanks, Katherine. Well, it was 11 years ago, and we fast forward. I never thought we'd have a conversation like we'd be talking about what we were talking about in 2013. So here we are today, is all those social issues which I witnessed in my non-council role, my day job, coexist. But there's been subtle changes. I don't want to sugarcoat it, think things are all rosy and going great for Indigenous folks, but things are slowly improving. For example, in the last recent bit, just champions making a difference in this province as I sit here today. For example, from the Island Trust era, fast forward today, we've been like yourself and an ally, and Sheila, our friend Sheila, sitting in the front row, and she's making a difference in the provincial lens, stuff that the public doesn't hear or champion in the corridors, to the other deputy ministers, to bettering lives for our people. A recent example on the social issue is, I don't think this is obviously a well-educated crowd is enough to sit here and preach about the social issues, residential school and whatnot. So I'm going to fast forward today is from residential school, child welfare, horrific child welfare practices of the past and trauma and all those things that we touched on earlier is trauma leads to addiction. And so one thing we're doing in our community presently as I sit here is we're opening up Kw'umut Lelum with Snuneymuxw and the other 8 nations, BC's first 12 to 18 youth treatment center. We're coming up with a better term, that's going to be a treatment center and detox. So we're going to get them upstream, and 11 years ago that would be unheard of. And we have, and it's obviously going to take provincial funding from the feds and the province, but the province are taking the lead on this, and it is champions like Sheila, not mincing words, going into the halls of legislator offices to make sure this happens. Just know that, because the minister of addictions is telling me that. She said, you can tell Sheila, we've got this, we're supporting this. So I want knowledge to answer your question on the social issues. And then presently we're really fortunate to have our own Satasia's brother, Kw'umut, being Premier Eby's one of his key advisors on these Indigenous issues. And it's not just making a difference here, it's making a difference around the province. And so I want to touch though on the piece that resonates, which I was hoping for in the political journey now. That was more on it's all intertwined. But the political role is reconciliation's been out there now for about a decade, basically almost a decade, and it's gonna be uncomfortable, but it's also a reality. It's a good reality though, because a better society for all is when all are thriving. And are we getting there yet today? No, not at the lower level of government. They like deferring, that's the Fed's problem, that's the province, the BC's problem, but we're not. I lived at a table for 4 years there. Mine sold the nonsense. There was zero opportunity. There was zero reconciliation, real agreement. They had a champion in their corner and they didn't want to capitalize on that, which was their loss. But we don't stay stuck, we go forward. So you have to have champions in government, but more so when you champions like everyone in your room. For example, I'm not sitting here assuming everyone here supports reconciliation. That's fine, right? Everyone's entitled that has their own journey. But what I do hope is people realize when we're all walking together, we may not always have to agree on things, but it's better for all. I don't like linking things to everything is ECDEV driven because it's not with our people. It's going to be crystal clear on everything. Of course, we have poverty. We want to get our people out of poverty. But it's also like the land and how we live on the land and how we have no land to live on. But working with, for example, I'll use a project in South Nanaimo, the Sea Cliff project, is the developer, which is the Bento Group, obviously deep pockets, and the group running it, the gentleman that's leading it was, so 108 acres got transferred last summer to Snuneymuxw for us basically endorsing that project. And that's, to us, that was a form of going the right direction of reconciliation because we're land poor and we don't have people to house our people in our small little reservations there today. So that, to me, that's a step on the business on economic reconciliation where instead of Jim Hartshorn around this thing go put up flags and, a statue. And I'm oversharing here a little bit. I'm giving the extreme opposite where they're going to go ahead, they're going to thrive, they're going to do well, and we are as well. That's a win-win. That's why I say working together. They could butt heads with us, and that project could be at a stalemate. Now, for those that are recent in the history of the Nanaimo, I'm not going to go too far down this one, but look at the old Tally Ho site. The proponents decided to say, we'll put up some art, you guys can go do whatever. Well, look where that's going. And it can remain like that forever, right? It's not gonna, but the same. So there's a way to do it. They decided to go the unreconciled way, and the other proponent is going the reconciled way. And obviously, one route's better than the other, in my view, and I think for a society's view, and our council and Chief Wise and council and our elders committee's view. But anyways, sorry, I'm going on a tangent there, Katherine.
Well, I was going to say, what I'm thinking of as you're talking about there, my experience, what a lot of people struggle with is they want to understand what the connection of First Nations to their territory is all about. They want to understand what it means. They want to understand why governments like the province and the IDN and the Islands Trust and Canada have to engage and consult with First Nations, why it's important that First Nations now have to provide free, prior, informed consent. But they don't, in order to understand that, you really need to understand a lot of the history. And so I'm just going to share my story, because I'm always learning. I will learn more tonight, just listening to Bill, listening to what some of you will hopefully have to say. And one of the things that I learned in doing this book, as I was going through it, And both these books, I really wanted to present a super positive vision of the future. I wanted people to understand how brilliant these people are who are working in stewardship and conservation and economic development and sustainable resource management, and how they're doing it and why they're doing it. And one young woman, Jessie Hempel, who lives in Nanaimo, but she's got some up in the Port Hardy area, said to me, Katherine, before you can set the table for the future, you have to clear it of the past. And everybody I talked to, Bill, you talked about it in your book, everybody in this book talked about it. They talk about, you have to talk about the trauma of history and colonisation in order to give context to a vision of the future. But the deeper learning that I got in doing this second book was to understand the impact of colonisation, because, you know, you're right, Bill. I think most people in this room, I'd be really surprised if anybody didn't have a pretty good sense of the impact of residential schools, a good impact, a good sense of the impact of disease and just sheer decimation of populations. You know, as one young woman said to me recently, imagine that you used to sit down with your family of 10 around the dinner table every night, and the next night it's you. Because that is basically what happened. But to actually understand the impact of colonisation and what it means today in terms of disconnection to land, and what you mentioned in terms of, you know, Snuneymuxw had the smallest land base per capita of any First Nation in the country, is to understand what things were like before colonisation. Because what I heard and learnt in this book was that going back 14,000 years, 700 generations, you know, Rome rose and fell, Egypt rose and fell, China, you know, all these other civilizations are far younger than the First Nation civilizations that have actually continued to sustain themselves despite all of these barriers, despite all of the impact of colonization for 14,000 years. The last 300 years are a tiny portion of how First Nations have managed themselves and have lived on the land and been connected to the land and exercised their responsibilities and their laws, not just to the land and waters, but to each other, because those things are inseparable. And so when I realised that, it was just such a huge light bulb for me of understanding how brilliant your systems of law and governance and management and connection to land were, because land told you, the place told you how you should behave in that place towards the land and towards each other. So I've leapt ahead a little bit in all my carefully prepared notes here, but this is what's going to happen when you have a conversation. But I was always intending to ask you to just talk a bit for people here, because I think it's really important. You know, the presence of Snuneymuxw on this island goes back far beyond when any of us were ever here or the first settlers on Gabriola. It's a very deep and intimate presence here. And what that means to you and what that means to Snuneymuxw people, what that presence means pre-colonisation, and what the disconnection, what impact that has.
All right, well, Snuneymuxw had a presence on this beautiful island, Gabriola, obviously long before contact, a way of life, just like we had a presence in Departure Bay, up the river, and a variety of our village sites around this territory. But at the same time, we had a village site up the Fraser River in Casey. And at the same time, so that's just a fast version. I'm not doing very much justice to it, but lived a thriving life and seasonal, like moved here, followed the food chains. And our big presence over here though was the clam bars. Obviously, not to tell you locals, there's great clams out here, right? And so nevertheless, as colonialism took over, we got shoved in these little reserves. And I'm just giving you the fast version, and not the very sophisticated version. But so I'm going to fast forward, if I may, because some people might wonder, well, how does Snuneymuxw? Sure, that was colonialism, but why today? And why is it happening today? That's a fair. I like to think that'd be a fair question if I was in a reverse. And the reality is, the reason Snuneymuxw has a presence, and you're going to have a presence here, being neighbors with you again, is for the fact is in 1854, we signed the Douglas Treaty. And one of the gists of the Douglas Treaty was to live, fish, and hunt informally, and this is one of the locations. So the Douglas Treaty has been tested in courts, and won in every court, and et cetera. And it sort of was always been there. And I don't want to minimize the past, but as we evolved as people, in 2010, we used it as our people, but it was mostly sort of a get out of jail pass. Some fishery charges or clown charges. Oh, you have a Douglas Treaty. And so around 2010, when Tracy's brother became chief, he elevated the use of the Douglas Treaty to where it's stronger. Why are we utilizing this? And ever since that started, this reconciliation agreement, one which Doug created with his team back in the day. Fast forward today, we just signed the Douglas Treaty, the reconciliation agreement too with Sheila's government. And the reason I'm sharing this is the Douglas Treaty has been tested. I know there's a few lawyers in the room, so they're more articulate than me, but is stronger in Section 35 rights in the Indian Act. And it's stronger, like no nations around us have a Douglas Treaty. They're in the modern day treaty process. And back in the day, some of you might have been around in the early 2000s when Snuneymuxw was in the BCTC process, and it was controversial, and people here didn't like it. People at home never liked it. So it's sort of a win-win for all, right? And we've sort of just abandoned that process. Well, not sort of, we have abandoned that process. So, but now, we're going back to our Douglas Treaty, and that brings us back to that developer conversation I just shared, where the referral process, fisheries, everything that you can think of has to go through the nation's referral department and be signed off in the Douglas Treaty, and some people are going to test it, and these are the results you're going to get. And someone say, well, the nation's going to hold everyone hostage. That's what I hear in Nanaimo. I'm not saying you guys are like in the Zealand. I hear that sometimes in Nanaimo. Well, you know what? No, we're not. But we're going to be part of the process. And if you don't want us to be part of the process, you can label however you want to label on your self-pity train, right? Because we're going to be involved, and we're not trying to kibosh things, but we're going to do things right, respectful, acknowledge we're not just going to go there, slash and burn and clear cut and all this stuff people think Indians are going to do. No, we're going to do it what suits it, just right for the natural environment we're in, what's needed, but most of all, what our people need. And they need to have the same as everyone else in this room's life, a respectful life where they thrive here and there in certain areas instead of just chasing poverty. And so I share that because I want so people realize what gives them the power over there where they're saying no to tally ho and yes to this or that. That's just a fast version. And we're being recognized recently have the same rights in the Lower Mainland and up in Catesy, and these conversations are happening. So it's really positive. The governments and the legal teams are recognizing it. And some of you may witness the D&D land transfer that happened a few weeks ago in our territory back on the other side of the water. So, yeah, I go on. I just wanted to share because I think that's a fair question. People going, why? Or how does Snuneymuxw have this? People at home, I've heard it, some people in the Nanaimo say, how do you have this heavy club over progress? We don't have a club over progress, by the way. We're just going to be part of progress. So that's a fair comment, whether it's received or not over there. I don't want to speak for here.
Well, in my experience, people do get confused. I mean, the law around capital C consultation, the laws around the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, they're complex. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand in all of that. So I think it's fair that people don't necessarily know how that process works. And, the short version of consultation is that there is a relationship constitutionally between Canada and the province and First Nations that do require consultation as laid out by the Supreme Court of Canada. But that's up there, or over there, if you like. Here we all are in this room as individuals, as communities who share this beautiful space, this beautiful island that we live on. And I said earlier, I talked about some of the principles that I've learned, as I've worked over the last 30, 35 years, given away my age now, in Indigenous relationships and working with people. But, I think they fall into sort of three categories, and they apply to us. They apply to you and me, when Bill and I are talking to each other. They apply in community-to-community discussions. They apply equally in government to government. I think actually if governments embrace these principles and set aside ticking boxes on consultation, we'd all be better off. And those principles fall into three general categories for me: respect, reciprocity, and understanding. And we've talked a little bit about understanding and learning and doing the homework of understanding who you're wanting to work with. Who is the First Nation? What is their history? What can we learn about them? What's important to them? I mean, I'm willing to bet that a lot of people in this room didn't know that Snuneymuxw have the smallest land base in Canada per capita of any First Nation. It's good information to know, because then you understand more about why access to housing is so important to the First Nation. Respect is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to lecture anybody in this room about what respectful behaviour looks like. We all know what respect requires. For me, in things like writing or any project that I'm initiating, if I want Indigenous people to work with me, to share their knowledge, to share their wisdom, to give me their time, then respect says to me, I need to ask permission. I need to seek endorsement of the work I'm doing. I need to start at the beginning. Not once I've already developed my entire idea of what the project is or what the book is, but at the beginning of when I'm thinking, this is something I'd really like to do, and sitting down and starting that conversation without an agenda, but to build a shared vision or a shared relationship around the project. Respect means asking permission at every step of the way. In both these books, permission to do the interviews, permission to record the interviews, permission to get them transcribed, approval of the transcripts, approval of story plans, approval of every single draft, every edit in it. In this book, I had a chapter pulled 1 week before publication date. And the reason it was pulled for the person involved was they're perfectly entitled to do it. And you have to roll with that and be prepared for that. It's respect. It's respecting their autonomy and their authority. And, just the same way we respect each other when we have any conversation together. And the third one's reciprocity. And reciprocity is just such a fundamental principle. And I am going to ask you to speak about reciprocity. Okay. But what I mean by that is it comes into every aspect of what we do. If we're asking to share time and share work, we have to be willing to say, this is what I can do for you. If we're saying so if I'm saying to somebody in the book, I want your time, I want to be able to tell your story, I want you to share your story with me, what can I do for you in return? So all the royalties from this book, buy lots of copies, because the royalties will go to conservation funds for Indigenous-led conservation. Copies of the book to everybody, not only in the book, but in their communities. It's in all their school libraries, it's in their band office libraries. I'm going to communities, if they want me to come to the community and talk with the school kids, do a workshop, spend some time in the community working on something. It's just really important to offer that reciprocity. Busy people, if you're expecting people to contribute their time and their knowledge and expertise, just as anybody else, pay them. All of these things are really important in terms of reciprocity. It's a long-winded way of me getting around to saying, as community members, if we want to work with Snuneymuxw, community to community, on our shared presence and things that will work well together for us on Gabriola, it isn't about big C consultation that the government does. It's about engagement with good faith and authenticity, respect, reciprocity, and doing the homework. But I want to, those are my words and things that I've learned. And Bill, for people here who would want to know, how can we work with Snuneymuxw? How can we show support? How can we be good allies to you? What would you say? What would your advice be?
Well, first of all, thanks for the comment. I just want to throw in there, And it goes both ways. How can we also be good allies for the folks on the island? So we will be your greatest ally. We will be shoulder to shoulder in most cases as we have conversations. I think we're going to be great neighbors. Because the reality is, we're looking forward to it. The reality is it's happening. But we want to do this, we're going to have to do this together. And we're not going to go the second option that I shared earlier. But we're going to go, obviously, we're going to have some conversations on what's best for Snuneymuxw first, but also where we're from Kensington, right? Kensington is not an elephant in the room, it's wide open, it's happening. It was discussed with the ND day when we had a private meeting with the minister. So, and then the farm. So we have to have these conversations, and we want to work with the folks here. If it's going to be anything like the treaty era, though, there will be space for that. And we're going to be respectful, and it's going to be reciprocal, I'm assuming. And working together, and I think there's enough space for everyone. And obviously, these really early conversations. And I don't want people leaving tonight and Derek from the sound I run is saying Kensington is transferred tomorrow or anything like that. That's not like that. Well, it's like in Indian world, Facebook's the gospel of truth, right? All of a sudden, it's like, is everyone already on Facebook right now? So, it's the Kw'umut people, which in our language means you'll get that humor, because on Facebook it's like, oh, really? It's the truth? But anyways, in all seriousness, we're going to have that conversation down the road, and but as many of you might realize right now, we're not the largest nation, but we're not the smallest, and we're pretty preoccupied right now. This is important, don't get me wrong, we value Left Island, but there's another land project right now that's probably take dominating our time right now, as you all know, at the T&Ds, but nevertheless, we look forward to the conversation. And I was talking to the chief her chief, Brother Mike Wise, who was unable to get, because we had the former rest in peace, we had a passing couch, and he had to go down there. The former rest in peace Chief Seymour passed away in Couch, and so Brother Mike was heading down Duncan, and talking about tonight. And I said, brother, what message? I know he thinks the road Catherine as well. Because what's we hope to get on tonight? He said exactly what you said earlier. What Tracy talked about earlier is start building the relationship. Let them know. Let the folks know we're here to grow and develop and be part of your community, and we want you to be part of our community. And I don't have much more to add at this point, except we're here at Good Heart, Good Mind. One of our basic teachings, which is not basic knowledge, you're also called Good Heart, Good Mind, and that's where we are, and that's how we're going to be. So I don't have much, I got more to talk about in regards to relationships, and I wanted to share why the strength's there. But we don't view the strengths. I don't want to come across as a threatening way at all. So I want to retract some of what maybe is delivered, we're going to be here as one.
Which is,
Just before I get off that my tangent on that is, Tracy's grandmother, as we all know, was one of the most profound humans ever. And she used to say, Aunt Jelly would say, son, when she was one of our profs at VIU back in the day, and just in life in general, visiting her, Aunt Jelly would say, son, when I first got to council, you're going to go a lot of roadblocks, but at the end of the day, you got to know their world, and you got to know our world. And so that's how we're gonna be, and Aunt Ellen's spot on, and so we're gonna deliver that at a relationship level with you folks. And if there's people that are like anti-First Nations, or those Indians are gonna come here and make a big res and all that stuff, that's fine. It's not happening, but that's fine, because we're not getting here to you're not gonna win everyone over. And that's okay, right? Everyone should have their space. And I personally respect that space. May not respect you, so there be mine may not be respected, but nevertheless, there's going to be all sorts, right? And we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah.
We will. And just before we open up for questions, because I'm hoping there are lots of questions, particularly for Bill. I'll just sort of close this thought on just a nice little story from a few years ago. This wouldn't have happened, let's just say. So this is amazing and beautiful to get this far. But back in around 2009, I'm going to say it was, and you weren't on this trip, Bill, but Chief Mike's mum, Chief Viola, well, she was chief at the time, just the most incredible woman, and such an incredible honour and pleasure to work with. And she organised for herself and some of the councillors and some of the elders and youth to come over here and do a little guided bus tour around the island, and where I could show them some of the trails at Kensington Lands, on the Wild Cherry Trails, and down at Whalebone Beach, and some of the places that all these lands that are earmarked for return to Snuneymuxw but hadn't yet been, just so they could have a look and see what they thought. And then got to around about lunchtime and we were up on Wild Cherry, and my house is quite near there, and we had all the sandwiches and water bowls and picnic and everything. And I said, well, come back to my house, because it was summer, we could sit outside and people use the bathroom and we could have a nice lunch together. So we did that, and I was just sitting on the back step of my house with former councillor Darren Good. And I don't know if anybody who's met Darren, but he's just a great human being. He was still pretty young back then. And he was sitting on the step next to me, and all of a sudden he just turned to me and said, Katherine, do you think we would be welcomed if we came back here? And honestly, sorry, I'm just about tearing up remembering that all these years later, how awful that he even had to ask that question. And so before we open up to questions, I just want to say a huge hush to all of you for coming and wanting to learn and listen and be here, because hopefully nobody ever has to ask that question again. Now,
Before we get into the questions, I just want to share that reconciliation is good for all the region. In this case, for the island, reconciliation is just good. And I just still think it's a win-win for all. And win-win, obviously economics, but just in general as human beings, and how we treat each other, respect each other's spiritual rights, culture, whatever it was they were into. So let's just want to share the reconciliation is good for all. And certainly the child welfare taking over the children to happier, healthier communities, it'll be a similar concept, a very similar concept. Thank you.
so I think that Sarah and Cardiff are going to organise any questions.
And anything that's on your mind, we definitely won't be offended.
Yep.
Anything that's percolating, just for clarity.
Lisa.
I'm happy to fill a space of silence.
Thanks, Ms. Webster.
I don't know, maybe I have insider information. I don't think so. Often people ask me, because I'm Indigenous, well, what do we do? Like, how do we talk to Indians? And so I always tell them, like, well, first, don't call them Indians. But one of the things I always say is, well, you need to have a relationship with Snuneymuxw before you begin anything. Don't just send whatever. What does it look like, or potentially what could it look like if someone on the island had a project and they wanted to do something? What does that conceptualization, what does involvement at conceptualization look like to Snuneymuxw? And I often jokingly say to folks, do you know the name of the receptionist? Do you know what the business rules are of the community? But what would I present, or what would I want to bring forward at a conceptualization level that would allow Snuneymuxw to be able to make a decision as to what involvement they might have, or begin to that conversation or that relationship? So, a simple question.
All right, how would that look? Well, the relationship and what, like, for example, it's not a political entity, but tonight's a perfect example. Anne's created a relationship now that I'm gonna carry forward to our chief and council and say, we might make her our go-to, Anne, whenever we have a pro or we're gonna go, let's get hold of Anne and see what's going on over there. But nonetheless, Anne's championed this. Anne's built a relationship now. It's simple as that. And by her bringing on Cetacean and Artist and Breaking Bannock, I think if it goes on, I think for a year, I heard earlier, that's great.
No, it goes on forever.
Absolutely, right? So anyway, you're right, build a relationship, and that's a perfect example of how it started. And then at Snuneymuxw as well, we can also improve too, probably on our website. However, if you have inquiries or get a hold of so-and-so too. So like I said, half hour was a two-way street, and we can do our end too, and have to. Thank you.
I was just going to add in response to Lisa's question, in my experience, and I'm still obviously working actively with First Nations people, is they're incredibly busy people. A First Nations chief is not like the mayor of a city, because a First Nations chief will get a phone call from somebody saying, my stove's not working, right? The sheer breadth of caring for a community, the duties are huge, and you've heard Bill talk about the negotiations that are going on right now with Canada, with the province, with the regional district, and then I happen to know you've got all kinds of recreational groups coming to you and saying, we really like a cycle trail, we really like, there are so many demands on First Nations people. What's happening with the sound? Okay. And so you really have to be persistent. I'll tell you today, I had a deadline where I was asking for people to approve their participation in a video that I've been producing for another First Nation client. And, I sent them the email, and I sent them another email, and it's a third email, and today I'm texting them, and then the ones who haven't replied yet to the text today, I'm on the phone tomorrow. You have to take the time and have that understanding and that patience to be very persistent, and also to understand that your wish list is not necessarily going to happen straight away, particularly, and Lisa's point is a good one, if the relationship isn't there in the first place. If you're coming in cold and just saying, we'd like a bicycle trail, I'm picking on cyclists, that's not fair, but it's just an example. If we'd like a bicycle trail, but you've got no relationship, then you haven't done your homework yet to get to that point where you can have that conversation about a bicycle trail. Where does it fit within the shared vision? Where does it fit within the 30-year plan for what has to happen next, and etc. Reciprocity, all those things we talked about before.
There's a question down there.
I don't know if my mouth might be easier than me. What are some of the ways to build that relationship? I guess, how can we, instead of just banging on your door constantly, what are ways to actually build a relationship? Do you have some suggestions?
For over here, I think the relationship, as we get closer to land transfers, but I'm going to retract. We should be building a relationship regardless, because for their histories, and maybe we have to, and Tracy will come up with some great ideas how we can, Tracy is also a great event organizer and amazing at everything she touches, and maybe we have to set up I don't want to say a booth, but a kiosk or some station or some other history here and have more presence. Maybe first of all, we gotta have a presence here in some way, shape, or form. I don't know how that exact look. Maybe we plant one of like Shane's longhouses here or something, or educate and have the very, I don't want to say basic, but basic information, sort of like Snuneymuxw 101. And as we go down get closer to land transfers, we gotta obviously work with the folks over here and have open houses and share our vision, share what the community's vision is, and learn your vision too. But to answer your question, start going too down a rabbit hole, is we have to get a presence here. We have a responsibility to build that relationship. You're right, people in this room just can't phone the Snuneymuxw office and say, hey, we want to build a relationship. right? Even though we know you got a good heart, so we gotta create at some form of mechanism on our end too. So I don't have a solid answer, but the willingness will be there. And we gotta get a presence here where it's accessible. I don't know how they look, but Tracy will come something.
I'd just like to apologize for not saying my name, Sybil Frey, and I live here on Gabriel.
Hi, Sybil.
My name is Sue Lewis, and I've lived here for 30 years now. And really happy that you're moving forward. But I just wanted to say you're not coming in cold. There's the ancestors, who many of us feel and know. But there's also the museum, and Geraldine, and Rick Carter. I forgot his name. No, we had the canoe, wonderful experience with the school and the community. So you're building on something that started quite a few years ago. It's been slowly growing, but yahoo, here you are.
Perfect. Well, we got to carry on. Thank you so much. And we have to carry on with that and work with the museum and get more involved. And sometimes I feel Cetacea gets put in, Geraldine gets put in difficult situations and asked her to write and do this and that. And she's a knowledgeable, amazing woman.
She's amazing.
She is amazing. Much kudos and love. And just sometimes doesn't get to the proper channels, back to the, so if we have someone, so one thing, how do I, like, this is not to Geraldine's work, amazing work over here, but what happens lots in the territory, across the water is someone gets a member to go somewhere, and then they'll say, oh, Snuneymuxw supports or endorses this, or we consulted with them and their thumbs up, it becomes our table, huh? What's this even about, right? And they'll, nothing to do with Geraldine's, but just in general, so we got to put out the proper protocol arrangement. That's one of Tracy's other gifts is proper channels. And it isn't about council trying to control anything. We want less at our table, right? But it is not, if it's not really endorsed or sanctioned, it's not, I don't know what I'm saying, but I know what I'm saying. Yeah, so thank you. There was another question right there. Yes.
I'm Don Buskirk, and I'm probably just like a lot of people that aren't here tonight. I'm aware of a lot of Native issues, but I don't personally get involved with Native issues. But one thing that I'm very aware of is that I'm living on Native land. And one year when I got my property tax notice from the Nanaimo government, from RDN, I thought, there's nothing in that tax notice that's going to the people who own the land, natives. What can I do about that? And I thought, what I could do is take that whole bill and take 1/10 of that and donate it to a native cause. In other words, I am directly aware that I'm on your land, and there should be a direct connection between that awareness and something that results in not just volunteering. All these things are great. Encouraging governments to do things are great, but I should be personally, financially involved with the fact that I'm on someone else's land. So I've been doing it for about a year. I give, I don't know, about 1/10 of my income to Lelum, I think. And by the way, I spread this out. There's about 20 different charities that I give money to. They're the only ones that thank me every month for my donation. And I think that's a very important thing, very impressive. But what I'm hoping to do, what I'm trying to introduce here tonight is the idea that each of us should have a personal connection with that we are benefiting from being on your land. From whatever else we do around here, the fact that we own a home, those of us who do, is something that is your loss in a sense, and you're not getting anything for it. And I'm not thinking that at any time in the future you're going to take it away from me. I'm not worried about that. But I'm benefiting from it, and I should pass that on. And so what I'm wondering is, could we even, I don't want to have the government increase their tax and pass it on, because that opens up a whole can of worms. You know, what are they going to do with it? You know, how much are you going to get? But if the government could encourage in their tax bill people to say, why don't you also connect, donate to your local native group? It's going to be, you know, you should like it. So you could tie it that way and just make it entirely voluntary. Obviously, not everybody's going to do it, but those who do, just add a little bit more to there. So,
Yeah, thank you. That's the, would be amazing. Obviously, you have an amazing heart. Thank you, Sarah, for speaking up, standing, and being bold on a conversation many would scurry from. And that'd be very interesting having that. And that's probably up Sheila's pay grade to have a conversation with, because they control the municipalities. The municipalities think they control themselves. They don't. They're still governed by the province, as you all know. And I think Sheila heard that loud and clear, and not offloading it, but we can actually have that conversation. But you touched on your philanthropic, that word always gets me. But anyways, we started a Indigenous led by the 9 Chiefs, KL Foundation for education, 4 pillars: education, physical wellness, culture, and language. And it's klfoundation.ca. We poached Sharon Hobenshield from VIU to come run it. Me and myself and the 9 Chiefs, and Dr. Ralph Nielsen's our advisor to help steer this up. And it's there's only 3 Indigenous-led foundations in the country, and we're the 4th. There's a million foundations that say they help Indigenous, but they're always owned or led by the Vancouver Foundation or David Fall, etc. So I know I'm plugging something here, which I don't, it's not usually my style, but I just want to say though, for those, it's a legit foundation. You get your tax receipts. It's gone through. It's one of a totally legit, amazing foundation. If you're inclined to peek at it, it's called klfoundation.ca. KL.
I'll make sure Derek's got it for putting in the.
And it goes towards those causes: physical literacy, health and wellness, because it's no secret also we're one of the most unhealthiest societies on the globe, right? It is what it is, and we got to change that. So that's what we're trying to do there. Yeah.
And at a personal level too, there is, when you're thinking of updating your will, if you don't know who to leave your property to, and you don't have kids or a logical beneficiary, then you can always consider leaving your property and a fund to pay for its maintenance in the tax bill.
Yeah, and you get the receipt for your whoever.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you're passed away, you're not worried about that. I don't mean to turn this into funny. Anyways, thank you, sir. And that'd be great. Restaurants are doing that project, Sheila and Victoria, that group, and they're trying to move up Island, that initiative, exact same initiative at a smaller scale, but move it up to what you're saying, sir. And that day, Giving Tuesday was, I think, in November, or was it November? Yeah. And in the province, our startup foundation received $60,000 that day that one day from the province or country, and it's great. So was there any more questions? Awesome.
Christine?
Hi, my name's Christina Berg, and I'm fortunate to work with a number of nonprofits on the island, and I'm wondering if there's something that we can do to help Snuneymuxw bring some clarity to how we can build relationships with you, because I know in my experience over a number of years, there's been a lot of different sort of conflicting information that's come our way. So if there's a way that we can support you to sort of bring clarity to build that relationship, that would be.
Conflicting information, like, in what manner?
Sorry, conflicting information?
Yeah, from
our MLA and also from people in Snuneymuxw that we've worked with, who we understood, like had a relationship with Chief and Council and that there was communication going back and forth and that might not actually be the case. So and it could be misunderstanding on our part, it could be misunderstanding in terms of the communication there, but it seems
Okay.
sorry.
So Catherine will leave my contacts with there, whoever is the person here, and you can send them a note and we'll get the proper communication happening with the Snuneymuxw, and then we can go, because what nonprofits are you involved with?
Currently, I'm involved with the Gabriola Arts Memorial Society and the Gabriola Housing Society.
All right. Perfect. The only reason I ask is good, great. I just want to even make sure we're the right fit for you, right? If we're of any use, so. Yeah, so Catherine can arrange. Thank you.
Yeah, you can come through me.
Yeah, can I have a quick follow-up on that?
Yes.
And it's kind of related because I looked at the referral process on your website and it looked like it was geared toward industry and corporation, but I think a lot of organizations here are doing nonprofit work, and so I was just wondering if it was the same sort of process and standards that are applicable to nonprofit as it is to like ones that won't bring profit versus ones that would bring.
The referral process would really be depending on the I don't know what initiative you're referring to. Like a nonprofit could be doing a marina well as well, right? And it'd have to go the same process. Like we don't have the process whether someone's going to make money or not. We're trying to get money. It's the process of the whole referral process as respecting the land, the fisheries, or whatever may be affected from the project. So there would be the similar process, but I don't know what magnitude, because it can be some referrals are just stamped right on the spot because it doesn't really affect anything, and then some.
So just for the benefit of people in the audience who don't know what a referral is, whenever somebody's applying for the use of Crown land for someone or a tenure on it, or they want to see the land use changed from one classification to another, whatever it is.
And private property has to too.
Yeah, and private property, it can be particular, say, under subservice rights, say that kind of thing, for example. If they're having to apply to the province or federal government for permission to do that thing or to enact that change, then that application will get referred, hence the name referral, to the relevant First Nations, or maybe more than one, depending where it is, for that formal consultation process that I talked about earlier. So it's that constitutional and legal obligation of governments to consult and ensure that granting that tenure or granting that change will not negatively impact the First Nations Aboriginal rights and title.
Yeah.
So that's what a referral process is. And there are steps to take, and the province certainly, and I think Canada now increasingly is encouraging people making applications to do some work before you put in your application, to have engaged with the First Nation, had a conversation about what it is you want to do, understand what their concerns are, and as much as possible build in their point of view into your application in the first place. And that tends to make those applications much more successful, as Bill was saying.
And I get a lot of calls from people in Nanaimo, like personally from the golf course, where, hey, I'm waiting on a deferral, like we're gonna build a relationship, but I can't make things jump through the queue. Like when people call or text me, hey, I'm waiting on it. Well, but anyways, I know you weren't implying that. There was a question over here. You have a question, someone?
Oh,
yes, sorry.
My name is Heather Menzies, and I don't know whether we want to shift from the very practical, which is proved to be a very fruitful conversation, but I have a sort of philosophical question. Leanne Beda-Mosaki Simpson talks about how reconciliation required reconciliation of two different realities, different ways of thinking. And I wonder if that's a big question, but if you, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could speak to that, I would really appreciate it. And particularly if you want to comment on some of the obstacles that stand in the way of reconciliation and different ways of thinking in different realities.
Okay.
Thank you.
The first part, I'll start with the obstacles, because the obstacles are general politicians and bureaucrats being bold enough to really cross the line and do true reconciliation because they're worried about their voters. I'm being blunt. And being in the city for 4 years, like, none of this happened. They can give a rat's, you know what, about reconciliation. And it's similar today. Because you get, we get the mayor and one time an MP saying, yeah, you have 2,000 people, we have 100,000 people. To right when I hear that comment, and the mayor has recently had a comment like that, not to me, but to one of my colleagues, and I'm like, well, they just showed their cards, right? They're not in. And so, and then, but then you get provincial politicians up the grade who are bold enough, like Sheila and some of her colleagues, not old enough, but some of her colleagues. And his premier seems to be doing the right stuff, and he's also creating the right team, even though it may not show in certain areas, but it's happening. And that's at the political level, and if you don't have the political will, it's not happening. So the First Nations that create reconciliation have to do it the hard way, which we don't want to, and it just comes out as reconciliation. Like, I'll give a perfect example about in 2010, when Doug was chief, the city, people don't realize that it wasn't 2010, 2011 was the first time water was for our reserves in Cedar. It was contaminated, trucked in water, well, trucked in water was contaminated. We had a truck in water up to 2011, and the city of Nanaimo had their stuff right there for the reserve in Cedar. And we all know, imagine what the landfill's done to the water over the years, right? I'm no scientist, but it doesn't take a brainiac to figure out landfill good for water. And so anyways, what happened was the city needed a proper water. The one up by Gogo's farm, there's that big fancy huge water plant up there. And it was perfectly created, and it was provincial land. It was tied up in the treaty negotiations. And the city wanted, it was saved money, it was the perfect spot. And so what happened was we agreed, and part of the agreement was they would hook up city water to our IR3, which moved the water out 2 and 3 out in Cedar to give the people a human right, I like to believe, water. So Doug pushed it, and we supported it, we pushed it. And what happened was the city hooked up their water to our folks out in Cedar. And then the city ran around saying, "Oh, we believe in this, and gave you water, this and that." And the reality is, it wasn't reconciliation. They needed something, right? So that's not reconciliation. Reconciliation is doing something the right way for the right reasons. But I don't know if I answered your question. What was the first part of your question? What was the real deep part? Yeah.
Okay.
If not, I can bunk out at Sheila's if I miss it. So,
No, you did, because I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to the obstacles, because then it grounds it. Because there's, a lot of people think, what is reconciliation? And I thought Leanne Bender-Wilsecki-Simpson nailed it when she said it's reconciliation of different ways of looking at the world and reality.
Yeah.
And if on our side, on Settler's side, if we can't open our ears and our eyes to be able to understand that there is this other reality, we can't be beginning to reconcile.
one thing I want to share before I forget is I've sort of spoke my thesis is basically about First Nations trying to go to poverty, reconciliation to get out of poverty, absolutely. But also reconciliation is also can be full of strengths that already exist. We have a pile of strength, our culture, our guidance, our people that are amazing in the water, in the paddle, fishing, hunting, medicine, herbs. Tracy's family comes from that background. Like, we have people that are experts in certain areas where we were raised in, and over the centuries that family's been the experts in certain subjects. We have lots to give back, and lots of, it doesn't have to always be, and I've sort of, it's my fault tonight, but I made it economic driven, but as reconciliations mean is just basically accepting. Where there's no cost in accepting and just opening up and having a normal conversation, like how we're engaging. That's, to me, can be a form of reconciliation. Just be good humans and accepting, and get away from that subtle prejudice towards our folks. I don't like bringing that up because I don't like ever playing like a victim card at all. I'm all about thriving and going and doing it, but it's a reality. I bet you there's not one person in this room that doesn't get up to Gabriel Ferry and say, oh my God, look at those drunk Indians. The crew that sit on the bench every day.
I say hello.
What's that?
I say hello.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying in general though, society. I'm being blunt. It's the run, but we all know they're amazing folks and had obviously something's brought them there. Back to that trauma we talked about earlier, an hour ago. So we gotta get past those stigmas and realize like, we just gotta be one. I don't know, I went offside there, but it's also bringing stuff to Rio. Yes.
Bill's got a favorite kid.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a couple minutes.
Just one.
Tara will rip me down there.
I just want you to.
What's that, Tara?
Leaving in 5 minutes.
Okay.
I want to encourage you to get a presence, as you talked earlier in your talk, here, so that we as just citizens of Gabriola have a place to go to talk.
I think that I speak for everybody here in inviting you to come back, as you've just stated, Bill.
Yep.
And it's interesting that you talked about First Nation Coast Salish 101, because this process began with our former executive director. Everybody knows Carol Ferguson. Carol Ferguson started this with what she called First Nations 101. So kudos to Carol for making that.
Thank you, Carol.
I would also like to, before I say good evening to everybody on our platform, I would like to thank the Arts Council team, Lorna, Dave, Gord, Bill, Odette, Chelsea, Marianne, and Toby, and recognize that Mary Charlotte and her team with this wonderful building made this happen as well. I want to thank everybody for coming out to support us in this journey. We're developing an online registration process for future events, and we've only started. Our next event is One Book, One Community at the end of March, followed by, we're talking about an initiative to include children. Lorna is coming back in March to teach bannock making. Jared Williams out of Cowichan is going to come and show Pequin salmon. So we're just starting, and I'm so thrilled with the turnout here, and I want to thank everybody for being a part of it. I hope to see you at our AGM. Donations would be gladly accepted for our Breaking Bannock series, and I'm a great believer in food, and I think maybe a clam chowder feast is next on the list.
Food's medicine. Oh, thank you. Wow.
And last but not least, thank you, Katherine Palmer Gordon. There have been some wonderful ideas here. The only person who's regretting this is Anne, because she thinks, oh no, this is going to be more great ideas that are going to come my way. Thank you, Katherine. It's my view that this should not be a one-time thing. It's my view that we're going to do all of these things and we're going to weave them into the fabric of this place. And we're going to change it. And this is how we start. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, guys. You guys are amazing. I love the island.